keychains, and I would bring them to school and I would sell them for 50 cents to the other kids in the playground. And I didn't know it then, but that was entrepreneurship.
I think we both had a very kind of pessimistic view on where we were at. We're embarrassed. Like, we're behind our peers. They've been working full-time jobs and we're still broke.
It wasn't too long before we were hit with our first major obstacle. We don't know anything about running a business. When you have this belief in your mind and you know why it's going to work, you have to hang on to that.
Jacquie, I know you must have sang a song on your way to work today. What were you singing on your drive?
My favorite go-to song is Haunted by Taylor Swift from Speak Now.
Dramatic.
Very dramatic. Yeah, it really hits different in the morning.
Love it.
I love it. Yeah. How about you? What brings you joy?
I started my morning with a Nicki Minaj Peloton ride.
Ooh.
Yeah, I woke up feeling very energized this morning. So I got that done and got a pump in before the day.
That's awesome. Yeah, I did. I woke up feeling like I needed a little boost of energy, and that's singing in the car gave that to me.
The T-Swift gave it to you.
T-Swift always makes me feel ready for the day.
So we met in engineering at Waterloo.
Mm-hmm.
Did you think that was going to lead to entrepreneurship?
I think at that point in my life, starting engineering, I had no idea what direction I was going to go into. We obviously studied chemical engineering. I chose chemical engineering because I'd seen so many other applications of it where people had gone into management jobs or things other than just direct
Very versatile
engineering. Yeah. But I didn't know where that would lead. But now retrospectively looking back, when I think of my childhood and I think of things that I did, like when I was in the second grade, I started doing little square stitch keychains, and I would bring them to school and I would sell them for 50 cents to the other kids in the playground. And I raised like $50 for cancer research, and everything that I made, I donated. But it just and then as I got older, I would just find different ways to like start mini businesses. And I didn't know it then, but that was entrepreneurship. And like it was always been in me to like create something and sell something and find a way to build a mini business.
Yeah.
How about
I can
you?
relate to that. I mean, I did all the lemonade stands and toy sales on the side of the road, but no, my dad actually wanted me to go into business. That's what he'd done. And because of that, I was very set against it, of course. So that's why, part of the reason I went to engineering, subconsciously probably. And then, of course, I ended up here in entrepreneurship as well. But it wasn't really until I did a co-op term at a startup that I even really knew that it was a possible path or thought about that or understood what that looked like. But then seeing that startup and seeing the founders there and realizing that they were normal people, and there wasn't anything, not that they weren't great, but there wasn't anything special about them. I realized I could do that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that it seems so far-fetched when you see, the CEOs of like Uber or Facebook. It seems like one of those things, like becoming a celebrity.
Like they're exceptional.
And they're, have all of these things, but really we've realized that you can just do it and get into it. When we were in university, we had this opportunity to go to Sweden. What stood out for you living in Sweden?
I mean, Sweden was amazing. We biked everywhere. It was a much slower pace of living. In Sweden, every hour of work, they have a 15-minute coffee break, fika. So everything is slower and more intentional, which I think was something I took away. But they're much more aware of the impact that they're creating. And they think about sustainability in their design of products and systems, whereas I find in North America we often think of it more so as an afterthought. So that was the biggest thing that stood out for me from a culture perspective, but it's very different than North America.
Yeah, it was cool going from living in Waterloo and doing all these co-op terms where everything is go 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 and you're absolutely pushing yourself to the maximum every day. I remember being in school, we'd study all day long, and then we would, have a little moment to go and hang out with friends, but then we'd be back up at 7 in the morning and studying. And so we pushed ourselves to the absolute limits. And then going to Sweden, it was
It
the
was like
complete
a
opposite.
yeah.
It's like a breath of fresh air. Like you go to school, you do your schoolwork, and then you come home, and it's like you have time for yourself. And everyone just takes everything so slowly. You take breaks. You drink your coffee out of a mug while you're sitting there. You're not just grabbing it and driving to the next place. So that, I think that contrast is what really inspired us to slow down and actually think about the impact that we're having on the planet and think about the way that we're living our lives. We didn't know at the time, but that was really spark for us that kind of started that idea of what is sustainability, and there is a way that we could be living that's different.
And then I remember in our final year thinking about what we wanted to do after all of our co-op terms. We were both going through interview processes for full-time jobs and thinking about what we wanted to do long term.
Mm-hmm.
What was your thought process?
For me, the realization came a little bit earlier than that. So after we lived in Sweden, I actually moved to Hong Kong, and I did a work term there. And so if when you live in Hong Kong, um, it's such a beautiful place. They have this amazing, vibrant city, um, very dense, lots of people living there. And then they have this beautiful nature. So there's hikes in the mountains, and there's beaches, and there's always something to do. And so when I was working there, I worked a weird schedule. I had Wednesdays off, which meant that I got to spend a lot of time by myself because nobody else has Wednesdays off. So I would go for hikes by myself in the mountains. And I remember one particular day, like just absolutely amazed by the nature around me and just so grateful for the planet that we live on. But it gets me emotional because you couldn't, you could see the impact that people were having on it.
Mm-hmm.
You could see the litter everywhere.
Right. And I think we've all seen that on, like, you go for a hike or you go to the
Mm-hmm.
beach, you're going to see it.
And there were days you couldn't even go outside because the air quality was so bad. And it made me think that this is the direction we're headed in, and we can't continue to go in this direction. And so from that point on, I was like, what can we do to make this better? And I knew we couldn't continue. I couldn't just live a corporate life and work for a company that's continuously pushing out products and creating more pollution. We have to change the way that we consume and change the way that we are operating as a whole world. We need to stop pumping out products, and we need to create more of a circular economy so that things can stay in circulation, so that we're not pulling resources for products that are going to be used once and thrown away and creating all this pollution.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that was also the time when all the documentaries were coming out on Netflix, like all of the, kind of disaster alarm bells were about to hit, the 1.5 degree Celsius were, kind of the doomsday
Mm-hmm.
type messaging. And I think we both had a very kind of pessimistic view on where we were at and thinking about, going into engineering, trying to improve the downtime of a production line by 5%. You can't do that long term. That's not the passion.
No.
And not going to move the needle. And so we're kind of going down anyways. We're going downhill. Let's try. Like, let's go down fighting. Let's try to change this.
Mm-hmm.
If the world is going to end from climate change, at least we can say we tried and did something about it. And that sounds really dramatic, but I think that was really the mindset at that time.
Yeah, I think that all kind of hit us at like the perfect time as we were starting to think about where we wanted to take our careers, right? And so it helped guide us into a way that now we can actually live our lives knowing that we're making a positive impact, knowing that we're on our way to making things better. The timing was pretty good there. But yeah, so when we went from actually working in these companies to starting the business, it was a huge risk. So we were in our last co-op. That's when we decided, hey, we're not going to apply for other jobs. You had some final stage interviews going on. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was interviewing for a brewery, which was like my dream job. And we were trying to decide if we were going to go for this or not, and make a call and commit. I think a big part of it was idea that we needed to do something. And then thinking about risk versus reward, you know, if we try this and try to start something, worst case, we fail, we're embarrassed, like we're behind our peers, they've been working full-time jobs and we're still broke. But if we succeed, like that vision of what the world could look like in changing the way people consume, in changing our systems, in reducing waste and emissions, like that potential future was so worth it. And that helped kind of minimize that risk. It's like, okay, this is worth it. That I think that vision has continued to kind of push us through as we've faced the challenges of startup life.
The timing is really important to note here. We made that decision in the fall of 2019 that we wanted to commit to doing this, that we wanted to start dreaming up a business. This was in our final term. We were going to graduate in the spring of 2020. It wasn't too long before we were hit with our first major obstacle of starting a business, which happened to be the pandemic, the COVID-19 virus happened in March of 2020. Everything got shut down. We went from being students to now living with our parents, moving back home, had to completely change plans, but we decided to stick with it. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard because I feel like anytime you're starting a business or anything really, you're putting yourself out there in a really vulnerable way. And I remember our friends and family looking, you know, probably looking at us like we were crazy because we got sent home from school and then we're so serious about this. Like we'd lock ourselves in our rooms for 8 hours a day while everyone else was just hanging out, you know, the first wave of the pandemic. I remember my mom, like people would ask her, "What's Kayli doing?" Like everyone's graduating, talking about their full-time jobs, and she's like, "Oh, she's starting a cup business, I think." Like it just sounded so crazy. If you're going to put yourself out there and put effort into something, you might as well go all out. Like you're already going through the motion, so why not push it bigger and like really go for it? And that really stuck with me. I think we were so lucky to have each other going through this and starting because one, Jacquie is the most overly confident person I've ever met. She truly believes in her head that she cannot fail, which is really good for this type of thing. And she's pushed me. I would not have gone to Sweden if it weren't for her. I would not definitely probably not have started this business if it weren't for her because she's always pushed me, you know, not be afraid and push the limits. But I think that's what really helped us as we were getting started because we weren't in this alone. It gave us this other, you know, she's doing it too. As we're talking to people and telling them what we're doing. And as scary as it was, I think the pandemic also gave us that separation because we weren't around everyone all the time. We weren't seeing as much what everyone else was doing. We kind of just locked ourselves up in this little bubble and just went to work and put our heads down. And I think that really helped us.
It's interesting because at that time, we had gotten a lot of no's. Before school ended, we were trying to participate in different pitch competitions at the school. And somehow we lost to a camera company that's saying that our cameras aren't good enough quality, which is on iPhones, which baffles me to this day because obviously the problem we're working on is such a huge problem. And then we applied to be part of this accelerator incubator program. And it's literally designed for students who just have ideas. We got denied from it upon the initial thing. We know what we're doing is so important, and we know that this can work. Fortunately for us, there was a group that backed out of this program, so we ended up getting into it. And then by the end of the program, we ended up winning the pitch competition. So it turned around for us. But I think we were just constantly getting pushed down and told that our idea wasn't good enough or that it was too hard maybe, or it, you know, people didn't want it enough. But we wanted it, and that was what was important. And so we were able to tune out a lot of that noise and just put our heads down and come up with a solution. And it gave us, it thrived on that confidence that we had internally that this is really important and this needs to happen. But I think the other way that we helped rationalize it was we told each other, we sat down, we had a meeting, and we said, what are we going to do here? Are we going to do this And what are the limits? Like, how long are we going to do this for? And we decided that we were going to give it 1 year of giving it our absolute all. And we could do that for a year. We could commit a year of our lives to just fighting for this and fighting for this cause. And then after a year, if we have absolutely no traction, if we haven't made anything, then okay, we can go get real jobs and we can, start our lives. And I think that gave us that visible timeline of no, we're going to work as hard as we can for a year, and it made it possible for us to do so. By the time a year rolled around, we didn't even remember that had
Yeah,
been a
we
year
were on
because
a roll.
we were on a roll. We were very busy, but it gave us that boost of confidence and energy because we knew we have a year to sprint and do
Right.
this.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so true. The amount of doubters and naysayers you have when you first start, it does make you think like, am I crazy?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're like, what are they not seeing? Like, I see this vision and I see that this is such a big problem. Like, how do you not see it?
Well, because I think it's really easy to come up with the flaws in any idea. You could look at Uber and say a million different things about them and say,
Yeah,
like,
like you're
who
gonna get
wants.
in a random stranger's car.
Exactly. When you have this belief in your mind and you know why it's going to work, you have to hang on to that because, yeah, it's easy to turn down an idea. It's easy to point out all the things wrong with it, but it's hard to find all the things that are good with it and to turn those into reality. And that's what we've always done is we've found the things that are good and we've rolled with that. But as much as we're stubborn in our idea, you could say, and then we really held to it. I think another thing that we had to do was also admit that we don't know anything about running a business, or we don't know how to.
We don't even know how a business runs. We've never worked anywhere full time.
Yeah, like that. I think, when we went to hire people for the first time, it was like, wait, we haven't even had a real full-time job. So what does this look like? How do we do this? Um, and so I think one thing that really helped us with that transition was just like keeping an open mind to learning and to asking for help and to seeking out ways to learn different things and then finding the ways to apply those learnings into our business and into this vision that we're 100% sure on.
Yeah, I mean, I get asked that all the time. Like, how did you know how to do that? How did you know how to raise money or hire people or whatever? Code, like learned to code to build the original platform for Friendlier. And I think engineering really helped us with that because it just taught you to really have a growth mindset and believe that you can problem solve your way out of anything. But it was truly just like watching YouTube videos, figure it out, read a book, go to talks. And when you get into the real world, you realize no one really knows what they're doing. It's everyone's trying to figure it out and learn. It just opens up the realm of possibilities.
So, Kayli, at what moment in time did you realize that we have full conviction in this idea and that this is something that's really important?
I think it's more so conviction in the problem and that we need to solve it because our solutions evolved and it's going to continue to evolve. The fact that we picked a problem that was so personal to us and so important to us, and truly believing that the world needs this urgently. And I think that's what's kept us going. Obviously, it helped us get started is having that real deep desire to solve this problem. I don't think we would have been able to keep going if this really was just about money, but having just that kind of blue sky vision of if we're successful, like in that small 0.0001% that we're successful, like this is what we achieve, and that's always been worth it and helped us push through that. And then seeing the results, like seeing packages come back and be reused and seeing the volume and hearing from people and businesses that are like loving it and excited and engaging just makes it feel worth it because you can like see the impact that we're making and it's
Mm-hmm.
really real and tangible.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we certainly got asked a lot at the beginning was, are you a nonprofit, or why haven't you formed this to be more of a charity, because it is such an impact driven business. And that's truly what got me, you and I, into this, is that we wanted to make a difference. We wanted to change the world. But I think something that we both understood from very early on in this journey was that if we truly want to change the world and we truly want to change the way that people are interacting with products and get rid of this idea of single use. We need to make this a super scalable and profitable business. This can't just be something that relies on donations or something that people feel good about and it's a side project. This needs to be something that's scalable and makes actual money so that it can be a massive corporation and then it can truly change the economy. We want to change from a linear to a circular economy. That's the goal. We didn't believe that you could do that with a nonprofit.
And in that, really drive value for the businesses that we're working with to be able to scale at a massive scale.
Mm-hmm. We talk about making this massive impact and changing the way people consume. But when you look at what we're actually doing right now and what we've built so far, it's a reusable container program. We're focused on just reusing food containers and getting them back and washing and sanitizing. So I'll ask you the question that people ask us all the time. What's the big deal? Who cares? Like it's just a couple containers. What are we building?
Yeah, I think really fundamentally what we're building is the infrastructure and platforms needed to support a circular supply chain at scale.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're using this really specific example, which is food containers, to build up those systems. But what we end up with is a tangible example and the physical infrastructure needed to support a circular supply chain. And that's so important because when we're talking about packaging specifically, but many products, the big environmental impact comes in the manufacturing of those products. It's the resource extraction, it's the materials needed, it's the manufacture. We also have this end of life, which we often focus on, which is the litter. What do we do with it when we're finished with it? But the most of the environmental impact, especially when we're talking about carbon emissions, is on the front end in manufacturing and raw materials. And so when you build a true circular supply chain, yes, you're eliminating those waste streams, but you're also seriously minimizing the amount of raw materials and manufacturing that needs to happen because you're just capitalizing on the products that you've already built and manufactured.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we believe is really necessary to drive the needle on reducing both waste, but also greenhouse gas emissions around consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And we're building that roadmap and building the kind of fundamental building blocks for what that looks like at scale.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to note, like, when you look at anything that you purchase today or anything that any business, it very much relies on this idea of this linear economy. Think about Amazon. Everyone's becoming so used to things getting delivered to their homes today, and it comes in packaging, and there's so many single-use items that we've just become dependent on. And we're so used to just throwing things away. Well, where is away? We don't see that. But what Friendlier is doing and what our strategy is, we've started with something that people will interact with every day. Food packaging, people eat every single day. So we can create those habits in consumers, so we can change consumer behavior while creating the infrastructure at the same time to actually get those products back to create that circular economy. So yeah, we're starting with food packaging. Maybe it doesn't seem that significant yet, but it's very strategic and it's all part of this goal of creating that infrastructure wide scale to enable reuse for anything.
You mentioned we were buying all these products, then they go somewhere. Where do they go?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the first thing to note is single use is huge. There's a lot of plastic being produced in this world, and 40% of it is being used for a product that's going to be used once and thrown away. It's astronomical. And if we look at paper products, 10% of all trees that are cut down and wood that is harvested goes towards single-use packaging. 10% of all wood. Think about that. Think about all the other applications of wood. So there's huge amounts of these resources going towards products that are used once and then thrown away. So yeah, you unbox your brand new product. You have this box. You have this wrapper of some sort. What do you do with it? So with a box, you're probably going to put it into a recycling stream. Plastic, it really depends on the resin. Plastic recycling has become very challenging and very confusing for consumers. Every single piece of plastic will have that little triangle on it, the recycling triangle with a number in it. That does not mean it's
No.
recyclable. There are several different numbers there. They all mean different things. If it's a PET plastic, polyethylene, that is one of the most highly recyclable plastics in Canada, at least. And so that has a good chance. If you put it in the blue box, it should get recycled. That's things like plastic water bottles. They have pretty good recycling rates.
Majority won't.
Yeah, but other plastics, like if you're looking at polystyrene, that's anything from like your cup lids on your coffee cups, that's a polystyrene. There's also, of course, styrofoam, which is just an polystyrene with a bunch of air in it. All of that is very hard to recycle and often doesn't end up in the right places. But because there's so many different types of plastics, there's so many different things, it becomes very hard for these material recovery facilities to actually sort them. And that's why most plastics aren't actually recycled. In Canada, only 9% of plastics are actually recycled, which is
that's a
crazy.
wild stat.
It is crazy. It's not because the science doesn't exist. It's not that we don't know how to recycle. It's just that it is so hard for these businesses, these recycling businesses, to make money off of these materials when they can't sort it effectively. They don't have enough of a certain type of material. Certain manufacturers are mixing different types of plastics to give them different features of the material. So as much as we try as consumers to put things in the right locations and put things in the right bins, it really comes down to whether or not that municipality can support that particular item. And so really we want to take that out of the hands of the municipalities to figure out. We want to try and extend the life of these products so that they don't have to be thrown away or recycled or downcycled into something that's way lesser value. But so much just ends up in our environment. And so it could go into the oceans, which is the source of this great garbage patch that it exists in the oceans. And then we have all these companies trying to clean it up, right? Think about all the different organizations that do ocean cleanups, they do beach cleanups, they do, city cleanups. There's tons of money and infrastructure going into these cleanups. Well, what if we put the money and infrastructure into not creating that garbage in the first place, looking upstream?
It's the turning off the tap analogy of like you've got a bathtub that's overflowing and you're trying to like scoop the water out, instead just turn off the tap.
Exactly. So Kayli, what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs who are looking to pursue an idea that they have?
I think the first thing that we did, which actually one of the first things, which was actually correct, was to start talking to every stakeholder in the ecosystem around the problem that you're solving. And we were lucky because it was COVID time when we started, and so everyone was at home bored. So it was actually, a little bit easier for us. But trying to understand the problem from every angle and like every person that's involved and touches it, and that helps you understand the problem in the industry better, but it also builds your network up. Like we started with zero network in this space, and having those early conversations with people, like just reaching out on LinkedIn, hey, I wanted to ask you about this problem, especially if you're a student, like people will talk to you. So that was super helpful just to start to build that initial network and then learn more about the problem and what that solution looked like. And then I think it's just figuring out the cheapest and quickest way that you can start testing things. And so we definitely made some mistakes there. We went right out to try to sell. Jacquie, you started knocking on doors around Guelph, trying to get businesses to say yes to doing something with us. And I started building our app to manage the system, which we didn't know what that needed to look like yet. And so because we were already building before we really knew what the solution needed to look like, we wasted some time there. Jackie'd have to come back to me and be like, nope, they're not going to do that. We have to change the whole thing and restart. And so if I was to redo it, I would definitely try to hold off on building for as long as you can while learning, as much as you can about what that solution needs to look like for businesses. But
it's all about building the least amount to get the most amount of feedback, right?
Exactly. Yeah. How do you get real feedback? Not being like, hey, if I built this, would you buy it? Because most people are going to be like, yeah, sure. But thinking about how you actually get that real feedback.
And what would you say about people? I think a lot of entrepreneurs are scared to tell other people their idea because they think people are going to steal it.
That's funny. I think you have to just put yourself out there. I think most of building a business is really not the idea. Many people, the amount of times who have said to us, like, "Oh, I had that idea 5 years before," which is fine. Like, everyone's gonna have ideas, but it's the execution, and that's the part that not everyone's going to do, and that you're going to do. So, I think there's, maybe some very rare applications where a startup does need to be in stealth mode, as they say, and not tell anybody. But I think realistically, most businesses, you should just be getting out there talking to everyone you can about it, because that's how you're going to start to build the network, start to get feedback, and be able to really start to move things and get real traction.
Yeah. Okay. So you have an idea, you talk to a whole bunch of people about it, you're validating certain points, changing up certain things, building the product. Then what?
Well, once you've gotten that early traction, like what we ran into is needing funding, because we were right out of university, we had no money, and had to, figure out how to get inventory and how to be able to grow the team and hire, our first employees. And the fundraising journey, there's many routes you can take. Obviously, we tried to get every grant that we could, which it is very difficult to get grants when you're in early days, because a lot of the bigger funding opportunities, you have to be able to show that you have money in
Mm-hmm.
order to get the matching grant or whatnot. So that's really tricky. We were able to get some early ones. So I would say apply to literally everything you can and pitch and try, because, one thing is bound to work out.
And take advantage of every little thing that you have going for you,
Exactly.
right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
we were women, we were students at a time. There you have to find these little niches that you can fit into.
And like pumping up what little traction you do have. We would have, like, we surveyed 45 people on our slides, which is, you could argue that's not really real traction. But when you are starting from nothing, like, that just shows that you went out, you did the work, you're talking to people. It shows that you're serious about it, and it's something to show for yourself. And so trying to be loud and proud about every little tiny win that you have, because that's showing kind of legitimacy. It's proving some sort of traction for you. And then once, we started fundraising from investors, that's when you have to get ready for a lot of no's.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all throughout the journey, you get a lot of no's, but I probably talked to like 200 people before we got an early angel investor. And it's very demoralizing, and they say soul crushing, which I think is very accurate, because especially in the early days, I'd find even once we did have traction and we were able to show that people want this, it's working, people are using it, we still would have so many people say, "Oh, I just don't think that's gonna work," or "No, nobody's gonna do that," or whatnot. And we would have the data to show that that's actually not true. People are using it, it is working, but it's you get a lot of opinions, a lot of advice through that process, and it's just treating it as a numbers game and talking to more people. And I would just reach out to people on LinkedIn, try to get a meeting. Again, we didn't have any network to start with. And then I'd have a meeting with someone and ask them, "Do you have anyone in your network? Could you refer me to 2 or 3 people that I could chat with?" And that created this spider web of people, and eventually ended up with someone who said yes. So it just takes a long time and a lot of conversations, especially for those first few yeses, but honestly, it never ends. It's always a lot of conversations and a lot of no's before you get anywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's really tough during those times to distinguish between what is legitimate feedback and what can help make our company stronger, and what is just them not seeing the vision and not truly understanding what has to be true for it to work. I remember there were times where we had, in those 200 people you talk to, a lot of them were saying similar things, which were telling us that we should, not be building the infrastructure that we wanted to build.
Just be a software company.
Just be a software company. Just be tech. Tech is cool. Tech is fun. It's easy to scale. How do you distinguish between what's actually good knowledgeable feedback and what is just totally not something that we should do.
Yeah, it's a really fine line. And I think, especially as a young entrepreneur, especially as young women, I think we get so much advice and people love to help, which is nice. And we have relied on that a lot. But also, you just get inundated with so much feedback and advice. And it's so hard to distinguish, especially when it could be an expert in your field telling you something. Um, but I think having the right mentors in place that really know and understand your business is helpful, because it's just a good sounding board when you do get all this feedback to be like, am I crazy? Everyone is saying this. Like, are they right? But having, the right mentors in place who truly understand what you're doing. And then also just trusting your gut, because when it comes down to it, you know your business better than anyone. And you have to be open to feedback, especially if it's coming from customers. You have to be open to advice, but you ultimately know the most about what you're building. And so you have to be able to stay true to that. And we had times where we got so lost in it. And I would be like, okay, we're going to be a software company now. This is the way. And it just, like, the story doesn't make sense. It doesn't align with what the customers need. And we just got kind of pulled in different directions. And it wasn't until we came back to kind of our core and, like, this is the solution that our customers need. This is why it makes sense, the way we're building. That's when we finally were able to move the needle on fundraising. But it's definitely easy to get pulled in different directions. And I think if you stay true to what your customers need and what the problem needs, then you can't really go wrong.
So you mentioned throughout this journey you had mentors, and it's really helpful to have those mentors to help guide you. Do you want to talk maybe about the community that you're part of and the mentors that you have, and then also how you give back to the community?
Yeah, I think we certainly wouldn't be here where we are today if it weren't for the people from the very beginning. We've had mentors, and they've evolved and changed as we've been in different stages of the business, but they have been the ones to open doors for us early on, to connect us with people, to give us, good advice in the times where we were questioning things. And we found those mentors through different community programs, through, the DMZ, Next 36, Innovation Guelph, Communitech, the different Mars, the different accelerator centers that are around us. We've really been able to tap into those networks, and that's been super critical. I'd say the women specifically that have opened doors for us, in fundraising, in other regards of the business, have moved the needle tremendously for us. Like, we would not be here without. There's many occasions where it was one woman to stand up and put her hand up for us, and
Mhm.
that's made all the difference for our business. So I don't think it's a coincidence um, that we've been able to tap into these really awesome communities of women who have found success.
Mhm.
And that's, you know, pushes me to want to be able to do the same, and to be able to pay it forward, and open doors for the next generation of entrepreneurs coming up, or just volunteering 30 minutes to chat through their strategies or whatnot, because that's really what made all the difference for us, especially early on.
Yeah, I think like flashing all the way back to when you were working at a startup and just being able to see it through that experience what a startup is and how it works. That's how I see us fitting into that equation of I want to show other young people who are in university, who are looking for what do they want to do, or maybe they're halfway through their career and they want to get started on something on their own. They want to live a more purpose-driven lifestyle. I want to be that example for them that it is possible and you can start something new, and you just need a little bit of grit, some persistence, a good community around you. But it is possible to create something on your own. And so that's why I love doing things like this, doing this podcast, being a speaker at conferences, and just inspiring people to actually take action and pursue those things that make them feel impactful and make them feel that passion around what they're doing.
Well, we don't hear about entrepreneurship that much. I mean, it's not really presented as one of the kind of top, at least it wasn't to me, pathways for people to pursue. And I think even it can be even as simple as just, offering help to people. Like, if I can ever be helpful, let me know, reach out, let's connect. Like, those little touch points are what make the difference. Because then you're kind of offering that line, and we've taken that helpline many times, but it's nice to be able to offer that out as well for others.
Well, I think we are super lucky because we're best friends.
Mm-hmm.
We have each other to vent to and to talk about different things to. But it also is really nice to have a peer group of other founders to go to, especially if they're solo founders. It's nice to have people to chat about what's going on in the business. And as an entrepreneur, every day is different. There's, as you mentioned earlier, there's highs, there's lows, and other entrepreneurs will get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so being part of that community, being part of peer groups, you know, being active and open about some of those struggles that you go through, it just helps to create this resilience amongst all of the entrepreneurs so that everyone can really drive forward and create successful businesses.